government. I want to shrink government. I want it to spend less so we can lower taxes, so that we can lower regulations, so that we can have real growth again. I mean, the government, Obama is having this this meeting. He's trying to have a big jobs summit to try to figure out how to create jobs. He's destroying all the jobs, and they're never going to come back unless we have more capital and more profit potential for entrepreneurs, which we're never going to have if we keep following these programs. So I want to go there and put an end to all that. And I also want to try to rebuild the Republican brand, which I think has been badly tarnished by people who have campaigned as conservatives, as Republicans, but who have governed as Democrats. The Republicans promised smaller government, but they give us bigger government. Under George Bush, he was the biggest spender since Lyndon Johnson. I mean, he completely increased the size of government, and all the Republicans went along with it. Nobody criticized him. I criticized him every step of the way. I criticized everything that the Republicans were doing under the name of free market capitalism, but it was all the same nonsense that's being pushed by the Democrats. Well, hopefully, if we can come back in 2010 or 2012 with Republicans who really represent something different, that represent, a true return to limited government, to shrinking government, like Barry Goldwater or like Ronald Reagan, not the characters we've had recently, then maybe we can retake our party and retake our country. Because if we don't do it, I think it's going to be a complete disaster. Anyway, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them about it.
My name's Tom Reinhardt. I was wondering what you thought of Dodd's banking bill.
Well, I think
regulations.
What Chris Dodd doesn't understand is that it's the government regulation that created the problem in the first place. We don't need more regulation. Government has to understand how its regulations impact the market. I mean, in particular, an easy one to understand is guaranteed bank accounts. Right? The government guarantees everybody's bank account. Right? And everybody thinks that's great. That's a disaster. Right? How many people in this room have bank accounts? And how many people have looked into the balance sheet of the bank to make sure that the loan portfolio is solid? Does anybody care what the bank does with your deposit once you give it to them? He couldn't care less, right? Because the government guarantees it. That is the problem. It's called moral hazard, right? So nobody cares. All you care about is how much interest do I make. The banks know this, so the banks just have to pay interest. So they take all kinds of crazy risks because there's no penalty for that. But if the government didn't guarantee bank accounts, people would compare. They would shop around. They would try to find the safest bank, just like you try to find the best plasma TV or the best car. You would do your homework and you would find a bank. And they would have private insurance company that would offer insurance. And so it would be a much sounder banking system. So the root cause of the problems are government-created moral hazards, like Freddie and Fannie. If Freddie and Fannie weren't able to, if those mortgages weren't guaranteed by the government, they never could have grown that large. Freddie and Fannie were the most leveraged institutions in the world because of the government. The free market wouldn't have allowed that, but the government took away all the free market safeguards the minute they put a government guarantee. So what we have to do is get government out of this industry. I work in the financial service industry. It is the most regulated industry probably in the country. And the amount of regulation that has increased since 2000, it's so horrific, it's so horrendous, that I never could have started my company 20 years ago because I couldn't have afforded the compliance. I mean, I have 5 or 6 guys now that do nothing but comply with government regulations. I couldn't have afforded them. So we are burdening the economy with these regulations, and despite all these regulations, look, Bernie Madoff stole $50 billion right under the SEC and FINRA's nose. I mean, the regulation didn't stop that. It's not going to work. What will work is free market forces and individuals looking out for their own money, market forces. The government is never going to help. And Chris Dodd does not understand that. That's why he was on television proclaiming how sound Fannie and Freddie were when I was on TV on the same day saying they were going bankrupt. Because I understood the problems. He's clueless. Yeah.
First of all, he's sort of an idol in our household. I got the link to that 2005 YouTube years ago from my husband who agreed with you. And I enjoyed this talk, but I have a background in finance. How do you plan on appealing to other people whose eyes are going to glaze over with all this economic talk? And what is your stance on other issues?
Well, I think my particular talent when it comes to economics is relating to people with analogies and keeping things very simple. And I have an ability to get people to understand what other people think are complex things and make it very simple and explain it in a way that lay people can really understand it. That's kind of what I've been doing for years. I've been doing this on an individual basis with my clients, and I think I can relate to voters the same way. And I think as the economy continues to worsen, people are going to start to get very suspicious of the promises coming out of Washington, because it's going to keep getting worse. The unemployment rate's not going down. It's going to keep going up. Inflation is going to keep going up. And people are going to feel that in their pocketbooks, and they're going to be looking for an alternative, because they just can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But that's what insanity is. And hopefully most of the voters are sane, and they'll understand that they need a real change. As far as the other issues, I think the issue is the economy. Because if the economy collapses, we're not going to be able to afford to defend the country. A lot of things are going to collapse if our whole economy collapses, and the government is just, as I said, going to seize so much power. Whenever there is a crisis, the government uses that crisis to its opportunity to expand and usurp additional powers, and so that is very, very problematic. I'm not, if you want to ask me specifically about other issues, I'm not.
Cap and trade. Afghanistan?
Well, I'm for free trade. I personally, I would drop all trade barriers. I think any kind of tariff hurts us. It doesn't hurt our trading partners. So I don't even think we should have negotiations about trade. We should just have no tariffs. It's fine, just whatever. If anybody, there's no reason that the U.S. government should say that Americans can't buy products or sell overseas. But what we need to do is understand why we have this huge trade deficit. That's a huge problem. We can't do that. We can't keep importing $40, $50 billion worth of merchandise every month and go into debt to do it. And we can't keep outsourcing our jobs to other countries and pretend that that's economic growth. It is not. So what we need to do is understand why we have these trade deficits. Why is our economy so uncompetitive? It's because of the layers and layers of regulation. It's because of our runaway legal system. We have 10 times more lawyers per capita than any other country in the world. We can't be competitive with all these lawyers screwing things up. And we need lower taxes on corporations. We have to have the highest corporate tax rates in the world. How can we be competitive? But of course, we got this huge government to finance. So if we want to shrink taxes, we got to shrink government first. And if we do that, we'll be a competitive economy. But right now, we're not. You can't manufacture competitively in this country, not because of the wage differentials, because of everything else. Back in the 1950s, we had the highest wages in the world, yet we had a trade surplus. Look at Germany. Look at Japan. Workers in those countries earn more than workers in America, yet they have trade surpluses. Those countries have trade surpluses with China. Why can't we have a trade surplus with China? We could if we had a free market, but we don't. We have this huge government undermining our economy. And as far as Afghanistan and defense, I don't think we should be in Afghanistan personally. But I think that the main function of the federal government is national defense. That's why it's there. In fact, the founding fathers weren't even going to give the U.S. government the power to tax. And the only reason they got it is because they said, what about a war? What if there's a war? Oh, okay, we'll have to have taxes because there might be a war. But they didn't even think that they would be taxing us during peacetime. It was for emergencies. And in fact, the taxes were very low up until the Second World War. That's when they first introduced their withholding tax. Even though they had an income tax in 1913, no one paid it until 1942 with a victory tax. So before that, no one paid an income tax, no one paid a Social Security tax. Taxes were negligible. But now, when we're being taxed to death because we've got this enormous government to feed, I want to starve it. I don't want that huge government. We have to just start slashing programs.
Peter?
Yeah.
So I just have a feeling that Chris Dodd has a big war chest, and that anybody that runs against him is going to have a big war chest. Do you feel you'll be able to put together that war chest to fight him? Because he has the unions, he's got all.
Yeah, he's going to get money from all the special interests whose pockets he wants, right? Chris Dodd pretends he's a man of the people. He's not, unless the people he's a man of are working at Goldman Sachs. He is lining their pockets. Goldman Sachs just had record profits. 90% of their profits came from proprietary trading. None of it came from, mergers and acquisitions or investment banking or asset management. They just took all that cheap money, courtesy of their buddy, Chris Dodd, and they gambled with it. And they knew that if they bet wrong, Chris Dodd was going to be there with another bailout. And if they bet right, record profits for them. So yeah, Wall Street's going to give Chris Dodd a lot of money.